Welcome to the Channeling Spirit Virtual Summit, a platform where we have invited Spirit to share messages, healings, and transmissions with all of us. May this energetic experience help us to expand our awareness and to deepen the relationship we have with our higher self, our spiritual team, and with Source, however we define them. Thank you for being here and for taking part in this amazing journey. Welcome to the Channeling Spirit Virtual Summit. Once again, my name is Daniel Martinez Stahl, and we are on episode 8, and we are with Samuel Thomas-Holland, who is one of my friends and members of my practice group, which I talk about regularly. Welcome to our little conversation. Samuel and I are quite familiar with each other, and so you guys are just along for the ride, which is a lot of fun. So Samuel, I'll let you introduce yourself, and then we will go from there.
Good morning. My name is Samuel Thomas-Holland. I have been with Daniel's Summit for season 1, and in that season we brought forward Archangel Sandalphon, and today we're hoping to bring forward, and we should bring forward, 2 very special guests through the channeling that will introduce themselves when I channel, of course. I did a mentorship with Jamie Butler, who I hope most of you know, on the channel today. She's had 30 years experience with channeling and trans-channeling, and also Reiki modalities and more modalities of trans-channeling spirit. My business name is Oracle in the Reflection, and at the moment the website is unfortunately going through maintenance, but Daniel has generously posted the email address where you can contact me. I'm also residing currently in Melbourne, Australia, where the time is 7:03.
Beautiful. And so one of the things that I really appreciate about the work that you do is, you play with tarot cards, you play with readings, you play with healing, and through all of these, there's a tremendously strong influence from spirit. They assist and help, and you're very conscious and clear about that. And so if you resonate with Samuel and you want to work with him, regardless of what it is that you're looking to do with him, rest assured that there's this huge team of very powerful beings that are supporting him in his work to help you find your way. And so that's one of the things that I really appreciate about Samuel. We all have very powerful teams. Don't get me wrong. I just am very fond of his very powerful team. So you wanted to talk about, well, let me kind of back up. How much of the topic that you chose for this conversation came from your consciousness and how much of it was driven by your team?
I'd say probably about 20% of my consciousness, and the rest was my team. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so talk to us a little bit about this transition period, different aspects of the journey. What is it that you wanted to share with us?
Predominantly more just how in the 4th dimension, before we reach the 5th dimension, things can seem a lot more faster, things slow down, and from what I've seen through other spirits' interpretations, I guess, or journeys, is it begins to go, it starts off very bright and then it goes almost into a black and white response before it's opening up to the stereotypical tunnel that is spoken of bright light, or just a bright light that then is just a shift into the fifth dimension from what we'll be discussing today as well.
Yeah, so I'm curious to kind of get your thoughts on it. I've been reading one of Seth's books, Seth Speaks, and within one of the chapters, he talks a lot about this process after death. And I've heard this before as well, but what he was talking about is that our beliefs will determine what we experience after death. And then we eventually evolve past that believed status or experience and move past it. And depending on our beliefs, it'll very much depend on how we transition after death and what we experience after death. And there are teams of healers and guides that will assist us regardless of what our beliefs are, to help us move through that and into kind of, the step beyond, whatever that might be. So I was curious to get your thoughts on that.
Oh, for sure. And I think, as has been stated to me in previous channelings, to understand it myself, there's always a lot more going on than we realize, thinking a lot more than what can actually be said to a human perspective, especially with things such as murder, or things such as a ripping effect of suicide or drowning, or even just a heart attack can have that ripping effect. I've been told as well, out of the human consciousness, out of the vessel that we call it. And it's an interesting concept then of where we reside in the fourth dimension before we reach the fifth, and we actually can then see it as a sense of heaven in a way, because that's where we are greeted finally by our soul family, our ancestors, our twin flames, and everybody who's been waiting for us, where we first have to go through a shift, as we are almost always doing in the changes of Gaia going into the fifth dimension as well. Us in our light bodies and in our vessels of human experience are always going through shifts, as we know. And even more so from what I've been shown, and which will be talked about today as well through the channeling, that it's more of just a shift than a tunnel, than what we've been told in religions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that the idea of the tunnel or the light and all of that, I think that they are commonly used metaphors for the experience, and because we've heard it, we experience it.
Mm.
I for those of you that don't know, I play a lot with the afterlife with regards to past lives, alternate lives, in between lives. So I help people experience that aspect of their journey, and through those relationships, I've gone through, not only myself but also the people I work with, a number of different ways into the afterlife. Some people will feel a pull, a magnetic pull. Some people will see a tunnel. Some people will see a light. Others won't. They just transition. I've had the experience in one of my sessions that I did where, after I died and I was in spirit form, without moving, I felt myself go through different layers of existence without moving. It was like it was an internal movement as opposed to an external movement, even though many of us will perceive it as an external thing. I think that a lot of this idea of death, part of this conversation that we're having, the people that are interested in these subjects have a more, for lack of a better way of saying it, a more balanced understanding of death. a more neutral perspective that death isn't necessarily something to fear, that it is just a transition into another aspect of our experience. But it is still a very charged topic for many people and a very charged subject. So I'm glad that you brought this up.
Indeed, yeah.
I think actually if we stopped calling it death and start calling it transmission or transition, people will have less fear of it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. And I think that that's part of where we're going, is where we start recognizing that, death isn't the end of life. It is just a movement of energy from one form to another form. Our bodies do die technically, but even our bodies are nothing more than energy, and that energy doesn't go away. It just gets shifted into different forms. And our consciousness continues. Our individual, this is my mom's biggest fear, is that she's going to lose her identity as Marta. And I keep on trying to reassure her that that's not the impression that I've gotten from everything I've read and conversations I've had with spirit. We keep our identity as those that we are experiencing now.
Not only do we keep this identity, but we keep all of the identities of all the lifetimes we've been through.
Yeah. So we don't lose our loved ones. We don't lose our identity. We don't lose our consciousness as we know it in this form. That stays with us. So it's it's really an interesting conversation and topic. Anything else that you want to kind of bring up, Samuel, about this and from your experience?
No, I think we should just start. Sorry, tongue-tied here. Go into the channeling now, because those who are going to come through can explain more and more precisely than I can, for sure.
Okay. Sounds good. Take your time. So for those that are watching the video, one of the things that some of us go through when we channel, is a physiological process of the energy that is going to be channeling through us to acclimate itself into the body. And with Samuel, one of the things that it does is it moves the mouth and the jaw around a lot. You noticed his eyes were opening and closing and fluttering and pressing into that. That's part of the process that he goes through. And it changes from moment to moment. Sometimes it's a little bit easier, sometimes it takes a little bit longer, depending on the energy that's coming through, depending on the energy that is around. I mean, right now there's a lot of us that are feeding into the space, and so that plays a role into the energy acclimating itself into Samuel's energy. All of these elements come into play. So take your time. We're here when you're ready. Just let us know when you're ready. one of the things that I do, and I invite you guys to do this as well, is I allow myself to go into a space of presence, and I invite and offer assistance in that balancing process that takes place. Some people will talk about imagining yourselves holding hands and sharing the energy of love between everybody, and that is kind of their way of connecting all of the energies together before they channel. There's different ways in which people do this.
Good morning,
Hello.
everyone.
Hello, I know who you are, but for the purpose of everybody else, can you introduce yourself?
My name is Rachel Joyce Scott. I was the first to die at Columbine High School in 1999. With me today is Eric Ruin-Metters, who some of you may know, Maitland, who also some of you may know, and also Archangel Azrael, the angel of death, who helped me on my transitional journey and through my life reviews.
Welcome, everybody.
As we begin, there is a trigger warning, so to speak, of what will come up through my explanations of what occurred when I transitioned. If you have any questions, Maitland, Eric, and Archangel Azrael can step in, so please, Daniel, and everyone. If you feel confused at any moment from what I am saying, please remember it is a life review and confusion can come across.
Appreciate that invitation. Thank you.
Describe it. I will not go into detail of how many shots were fired. But I will start where my transitional journey begins. Paralyzed on the cement, hair pulled back, and asked a question. And seeing a fractured reflection of myself. Some of you would call it the spiritual form that it was and is. a reflection of myself, and I knew where I was going when I saw it. I was not scared. I was not frightened, or
Rachel,
even
if I could just interrupt really quickly, if you can, if it's possible for you not to move the head up and away when the sound is a little bit quiet. So if you can keep the projection forward so that we can hear you a little bit better, that would be great.
I will do my best.
Thank you.
When I saw myself, it was translucent. Almost black and white, but there was brown fragments to it also. Like looking into a dirty mirror. But it smiled back at you. And I knew I was safe of where I was going, even though I was terrified in the moment.
Did you know you were transitioning at the time?
Yes, but I had already known that for a long time and had told friends and family members that this would be my last year on Earth. When the bullet went through my left cranium, it felt like an explosion. I could feel my body flying backwards, but before I knew it, I was standing there watching Eric and Dylan, who you know as the murderers of that day, but who were actually two loving beings who chose to separate themselves so much for the event to be able to achieve and teach the lessons to the world, the collective, even though half the lessons have not been learned still. But I stood there. I knew I was not in my body any longer for the tremendous pain that ricocheted through my head was gone, and all I could feel was tranquility and a buzzing frequency. But when I looked down, my fingers looked like long fingernails of light. Uh, Surprisingly, I still had my clothes on that I died in, that I transitioned in. But I could feel everything, see everything. To explain it, it looked like watercolors, but there was light everywhere. Everywhere I looked, there was just bright white light, or even sometimes golden light. But I was still at Columbine. The time seemed to have slowed, and I was more fluid in my movements. Where I saw my gym teacher, Mr. Saunders, get shot and fall down. He did not transition immediately. All my friends helped him and pulled him into another room. But I digress. He did transition eventually. I was more concerned about my brother's energy though, where I could sense him, but everything was so bright, almost like someone had turned on a massive football stadium light and was shining it in my eyes. And even though I looked left to right and around me, I began to understand and sense, smell, but also vibrational energies. I could feel my brother Craig's energy. And so I slowly made my way into the library. And I could see him at the end of the rows. But even he looked like he was a beam of light. And the buzzing in my ears began to get louder. But it did not deter my tranquility, for it was a feeling still of let go. There was no carbon around me to worry about. All I was worried about, though, was my brother, for I could sense that he was not meant to die that day. But before I could reach him, the booming of the gunshots came into the library, and I tapped one of my friends on the shoulder. Unfortunately, she was shot through the shoulder also, but I soothed her energies. She was so frightened, of course. But I told her to stay down, play dead. They won't shoot you again if you play dead. And she did so. After a while, I moved on to Craig's energies. When I found him, his friend Isaiah was being brought out, and Eric and Dylan immediately shot him through the head and in the stomach, and Isaiah's light being formed came out of his vessel straight away. He was beautiful, and he motioned for me to join him, but I told him no. I had to make sure Craig was safe. And so he went to the back of the room of the library and waited, as did the others who were being shot or had already transitioned before I got to Craig. As Eric and Dylan moved forward, light poured down, immense light, and Eric became irritated. And Craig's clothes became damp, wet, I moved away from him and I hovered over him. And as with my female friend, I told him, play dead. Eventually, Evan and Eric left the library and the side door opened and beams of light came forward. I hung on to Craig like a backpack. If that analogy helps, or I just helped. I was digging into his back and I didn't want to let go. For as he passed my body, bloody as it was, he didn't look back, and I was grateful for that I did. And I at least got to say goodbye to what I was. But as the days went by, my family found out, and that was heart-wrenching. For they could feel me, but they just called it a coincidence, a gust of wind, not the synchronicity that it was, truthfully. The more time I spent in this limbo, as I called it, the lights faded, the buzzing in my ears stopped, but the tranquility remained, the essence of feeling let go, released, diminished. Sounds become muffled, emotions become stifled. Colors began to go into black and white, with intense light, though still pouring out of everything. Before I knew it, I was viewing my coffin. All the signatures from my friends who missed me. Even though I could touch their hearts and sense everything they were going through, they could not hear me. But also at my funeral, Eric and Dylan sat there, unconscious, but they were also in their limbo state. But they offered and motioned for me to sit down with them. But there was no animosity anymore, no bitterness. They were in a state of let go as well. And their lights were beautiful. And so I sat down and watched my funeral, my family weeping, as all families do, the past loved ones, transition loved ones. And all I could do was sit in tranquility and wait. The shift that most of you refer to as the tunnel, for me was more just as a blinding light towards the end, where I was comforting my brother Craig, for he was going through immense depression. As he slept, I watched over him, but suddenly a light was like a spasmic flick of the fingers, and I was somewhere else. I did not recognize it as the fifth dimension at first. But when my grandmother stepped forward, I knew where I was. Everything was white. Everything was pristine. All my family members, as Rachel, were there in their light embodiment, but also all my past ancestors, guides, and more were there. I was immediately taken by Archangel Azrael and Raphael, and they vibrationally healed the cutting effects of how I died. With Raphael bringing forward more healing than what can be described in the human consciousness, for it was vibrational healing up with the stress of being ripped from one's vessel to suddenly I open up for any questions now. And
Thank
so
you,
does
Rachel.
Archangel Israel. You're
Yes,
welcome.
a couple questions here. Were you aware of the fact that something was going to happen that day? Consciously?
Not that day, but I was aware that I was going to die that year of 1999, yes.
And why, now that you're in a position where you can answer this question with more clarity, why did you choose that particular way of transitioning? What was the purpose behind it?
For immediate forgiveness for Eric and Dylan, who were in a contract with me, as well as themselves, where they wished to bring forward new avenues of mental health practices. But everyone has always seen it just more for the gun laws. And the puppeteering of lessons that were not truthfully what they were trying to achieve. But for me, soulfully, it was immediately forgiveness. I wish to learn forgiveness from such a what is perceived as evil deed. but truthfully was just a lesson within itself. And thus I knew I was going to transition. For being so connected to religion and beliefs of my own, I had already gone within enough to see what others could not. And although it scared them, I was at peace.
So Casey's asking, or just for confirmation, that the three of you had agreements in place before you were even born, the pre-birth plan for this to happen.
Precisely. Hence why I spoke of the separation. Otherwise, they could not have committed such lessons. Them being ostracized at school, feeling inadequate in their own experience, journey, was all pre-planned. Although holistic medicine could have helped balance them, and as I saw within through my religious beliefs, they could have seen within through their balanced meridians and chakra systems if they had been rebalanced. But they did not, for everyone just saw the external with them. And it was more just give them drugs and everything will be okay terminology. From the essence of going within and seeing a holistic approach could have helped them choose whether if they wanted to continue down the road that they did.
Let me ask you, and this is an answer that I already know the question of, because in conversations that I've had with you in the past, you revealed this to us, but what is your purpose now where you are in what you are doing currently?
To facilitate change, Daniel. Change on many levels. You may know this as the transitional shift of Gaia, or just the everyday shifts of evolution. Change in every sense of the word is what I am now. Even though change can seem detrimental at first, know that I and many others like me are always protecting you during immense changes.
And again, I know the answer to this question already, but what is the purpose of you working with our friend, and why have you chosen to trans-channel?
Samuel and I are soul family. The trans channel is my evolution within itself. For I wish for my messages to be heard in a more accurate manner instead of just the frequency and the synchronicities that I always offer, but are always sometimes, most of the time, seen as coincidence. And that can get a little that can become a little frustrating, even on a spiritual level. So it is more precise to evolve through trans-channeling. Or at least my messages can be seen as truth instead of just coincidence.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that experience with us.
You're most welcome.
There's a question for Azriel if it's a good time for him to step forward or her to step forward, depending on how they're presenting themselves today.
They, I suppose, is a better word for them, but they
Yeah.
are both sexes. Yeah.
So thank you for sharing your story with us, Rachel. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Always an honor and a pleasure to chat with you. And so some of you may feel a shift in the energy as I just did, which forced my body to take a deep breath. And I'm feeling like a tingling sensation all through my body right now as the energy is shifting. I'm taking some breaths to help and assist in the transition.
Good morning to the collective.
Hello, welcome.
It is my pleasure to be here.
It's an honor to have you. Thank you for coming to play with us.
The honor is mine.
So before we get into the question that has been asked for you, I'd love to get your perspective and point of view on the journey that Rachel just spoke to from your perspective.
To best describe it, as a light of thread bearing through a hole. The fourth dimension is just that. For Rachel, as with others, beams of light are being threaded through a hole. God, source energy, creator of everything that is, whatever you wish to label it as, is the tranquil feeling, the tranquil frequency that she was referring to, the ability to let go, the light is all pieces of everything that is. Time, as you know it, slows down due to this thread bearing of light process. So there is an expanse occurring. a shift, if you will. As you evolve on Gaia in your carbon form, you are also experiencing this, both the thread bearing and both the evolution. The light she described all around her, of course, was auras, as well as the frequencies of others. But is there a more precise question, Daniel? Or I could go on for hours.
Absolutely. So it's going to be a general question, and I apologize about this, but for those of us that are listening that would like to better understand this process of transition, I love the idea that you described as light being threaded through a hole of a needle. Is there something that you can share with us that would help us understand or be more at ease with that transitional period?
So many of you forget to breathe, but also the fear of not being able to breathe is a constant necessity, a constant conductive source of the fear. Letting go of the fear and placing your trust that even if you cannot breathe, you are where you need to be. It's the strongest consciousness that you can find. For even without breath, you are still completely whole. Your conscious mind merely is a conductive reactor. This in turn is the light being threaded through the hole also. For each breath you take or do not take, you are still existing, even though the creeping fear lingers. Experiencing the ringing in your ears is a help. But
Thank you for that.
humanity
Sorry, I interrupted you. Once humanity.
can surpass the fear of not breathing, then transcendence is seen. For your light echoes far more strongly and far more profoundly when the fear of not breathing is taken out of the equation. Please continue, Dan.
Thank you for sharing that. And for those of us that are listening to this recording at some point and are live, any recommendation or advice that can help us transition through that fear of not breathing when we get to that point in our experience?
Being one with the senses, especially the sixth sense. But as I have stated also, attuning into the frequencies with your ears, being at peace with the ringing in your ears. And allocating every part of your body to understand where you lie within, just as much as you lie from without.
So we can use our bodily senses even after death to help us identify the observer of who we are. Is that what I'm understanding?
This also helps with astral projection. For the fear of not breathing also factors into this also. But in terms of transitioning, yes. To become more associated with your light body and less fearful of not breathing helps one associate death transitioning with more ease.
Beautiful. Thank you.
More splendor.
And with regards to people that are working in hospice, what should hospice workers know to improve the process in their work with their clients and patients? And if someone is considering hospice work, what is the first thing they should know? Two questions there.
Do not be fearful of the synchronicities that happen around death. For it is inevitable. Be at peace with what is said, what is seen, what is felt. And see it for yourself as a lesson within itself. For each passing, each transition is a beautiful lesson within itself. The human experience merely always factors into the emotions more. And that is neither here nor there. But to remember what the transition actually means to you. Or even you will die one day also. Can you find the peace from another's departure into the fifth dimension? So that you may learn the lesson that they are providing for you on your departure.
Beautiful. Thank you. And another question that's come up is, can we utilize drugs to help us during the transitional period?
And this is already a yes. For the suffering before the inevitable is not what is necessary. Peaceful submission, peaceful slumber is what is required. For there is more frequency and alignment and attunement needed if such things as a heart attack or a ripping pain is being caused before the inevitable. But within speaking this, the lessons which have been brought forward by the individual light source themselves also needs to be taken into effect. For some may wish to experience such suffering before their departure. And who are you to relieve them of that lesson? Even though it sounds harsh, one must see the balance in that lesson also.
Thank you for that. And I'm curious, given everything that you've already shared with us, and kind of stepping aside or away from the journey that we experienced with Rachel Joy, what can you share with us about this process that would be helpful for us to better understand? Or what else can you share with us is a better way of asking it?
That the fourth dimension is always temporary. You understand it now thanks to Rachel's interpretation of her own journey. It can be infuriating. It can be miserable at times also. But as we have already stated today, it within itself is an evolutionary process of shifting. and threading your light into the exact frequency so that you may shift into the fifth dimension with more ease. Where there, communication with frequency and synchronicities are always more apparent and easily perceived. So do not fear the fourth dimension.
My awareness is going towards a question or a comment, which I would love for you to speak more towards, which is that there's no right way or wrong way to go through this transitionary period.
And that is accurate then. As I have stated, and as Rachel said herself, it is all through constructed beliefs, constructed consciousness as to where your journey will be in the fourth dimension. Some have found it very soothing. Others have found it a living hell. But the inevitability of the shift, as you all know now, is a truth. For you are always shifting into the fifth and higher dimensions.
Speaking of dimensions, this is a term that is used by many people in different ways. And I've heard the fourth dimension as being described differently than the way that you've been using it through our friend today. And the question that has just been asked is the fifth dimension eternal? And I bring this up with that question because the way in which we're talking about dimensions can vary from time to time and person to person. But I would love to get your perspective on that.
This factors into the parallel, Daniel. Well, the fifth dimension, as I am referring to it, is where light beings go when we transition. But it is also a consciousness within itself that planetary embodiments can achieve. For even those planets who you referred to as extraterrestrial have achieved 11th dimensional consciousness and are at play with light beam dimensions also.
Thank you for that. And so going back to the question, is the fifth dimension eternal?
In more ways than one. There is infinite possibilities in the fifth dimension, more than can be described for a human consciousness to understand, unfortunately. Even though you already understand it deep within, that is your own journey to take and not mine to explain.
Appreciate that. Thank you. I'm aware of the time and I'm curious. I'd love to get Eric's perspective on his journey, given that his transition was through suicide. I would love to get his point of view on that if he's able to come and talk with us, if there's nothing else that you would like to share with us.
It has been my pleasure to step forward, Daniel. Everyone.
Honor to have you with us as always. We are very grateful.
Good morning, everyone.
Take your time, Eric. Good morning.
You know me as Eric from Channeling Eric and my mother, Lisa Medhus, who operates that channel on YouTube and our blog.
Welcome. Welcome. So I wanted to invite you forward because I know that suicide is a term that a lot of people misunderstand, myself included. And I'd love to get your perspective on your journey and your transition and why you chose that path for the reason that you chose it in that lifetime as Eric.
There were certain separations of mental health that I constructed when I came forward into my physical existence. But at the same time, I did not see what was in front of me. I could only see day to day. But also, much like Rachel Joyce Scott, I needed to help change Gaia and other planets. And I had made that responsibility before I came in. And it's why suicide was my option. It was one of my doors, one of many. But where I am helps many more people, and consciousnesses evolve and change than where I could have been as Eric Ruin Medhus in the physical responsibility. Where I would have had more, I wish to use a harder time, but it'd bring me more difficult time with my mental health, and to have people believe what my spiritual teachings as Eric. Whereas for truth in my physical form, where in my spiritual I can disconnect and be at many places at once, including other planets. This in turn, as you know, helps me to help you evolve far more effectively into what you need to be as a spiritual being, into what the consciousness of Gaia needs to be as a spiritual being, just as much as your individual involvement.
Given that you chose suicide as a transition, can you speak to people that have lost someone through suicide or are even contemplating suicide themselves? Can you talk to that aspect? And it's two very different questions. I realize that, with two very different responses. And I don't necessarily want to, let me put this little caveat out there. I'm not inviting people to commit suicide, but I am asking a question to help those that are contemplating that better understand their own process and their own journey.
As Azrael brought forward, those who have already committed suicide have done so for a lesson, for transition. Death is inevitable, as he stated also. It is a societal belief that suicide is a sin, suicide is wrong, suicide is this, suicide is that. But at the same time, what you have heard from me and what you have heard from Rachel and from Azrael this morning, suicide is merely a transition after time to teach loved ones what they have forgotten, what they have disrespected in their own experience, and bringing in lessons of grief, lessons of being able to let go, and lessons in more aspects than one, in even promoting another individual's aspects that they thought they would never do, but because of that loved one committing the deed so lovingly, to teach them that lesson that they could, give them that confidence they could through the grief, through the sadness, through all the emotions. If you are contemplating suicide, it's either go to a psychologist or go to a psychic. Who is trained in such ways of understanding the lessons. But just find and talk to someone, talk to a friend, talk to a family member. Even though their emotions may rise, that may be all they need to stay on the course of their journey. But if it's contemplation, ask them to go within. Ask them to write in a journal. And ask them to show that journal to someone who loves them. So that individual can understand where their loved one is coming from. And if anything, Eastern medicine may even help. Universal healing, acupuncture, massage, things that quell the body, soothe the mind, balance the chakra systems and the energies around us. But everything is from within, and thus is the lessons being taught to us all. We need to stop associating everything from the external. Writing is the best way forward, where your most inner thoughts can be produced through writing. But speaking to someone who cares, someone who understands within, is the best way possible to help someone who's contemplating the deed.
Thank you. Anything else that you would like to share with us before we move forward?
Just don't be afraid of what's already coming for you. So many of us fear death, even though we put on a brave face. It is time to actually ask the question, why are we so fearful of the transition? Even though we put on such a brave face. What does death really mean to you? What does transition truly mean to you? Then the fear will dissolve, or it is unnecessary. And that is what we are all, as light beings, trying to achieve in the change and in the evolution of you all. That death is merely a lesson unto itself. And always
It's a
has been.
beautiful reminder. Thank you very much. I don't know if Maitland would like to step forward to say hello since she's with us, or if it feels like a good place for us to bring this conversation to an end.
MAITLAND. No, just saying hi and bye. Really, everyone said it so much. I don't have anything to say, but just lovely to meet you all. My name's Maitland,
Lovely to have you
and I
here with
work a
us.
lot with Jamie and Eric, and now with Rachel Joyce Scott as well. There's many others. But it's been lovely to be with you all today. Mwah.
Lovely to have you. See you later, alligator. Bye-bye, butterfly.
Hasta min wala everyone.
Take your time. So for those of you that are here with us live, Maitland spoke through Kiara in season 2. Maitland is one of the guides that works very closely with Jamie Butler, who was our teacher. And she works with many people, even outside of Jamie Butler's circle of luminaires. Maitland presents herself as a young child, 9-year-old girl. So her energy is oftentimes very playful and very, very uplifting. And she does that on purpose. So shortly, I will be posting the recordings from season 2 on YouTube, so you can tap into that if you missed season 2. Samuel, you're back with us?
Yep.
Awesome. Let me get myself back on video. So thank you for allowing us to communicate with members of your team. It's always an honor and a pleasure to connect.
Thank you. And thank you for everyone who's been here today to be a part of this wonderful channeling of spirit and understanding what the limbo effect and everything else associated with it is. Yeah.
And I'd like to, again, kind of talk about the work that you do. Because if people are interested in working with you for a reading or for a healing, tarot related or otherwise, can you talk a little bit about different ways in which people can connect with you and work with you? And
yes,
if it's
as you stated, yeah, if I work a lot with the tarot card readings, and that's a great modality because that almost is a channeling aspect as well, as my guides and even archangels step forward a lot with that. I use the Nostradamus deck a lot, as I've had a past life with him as his apprentice years ago, and so his energies and mine gel quite easily. But also, as we've seen today, trance channeling, it comes very easily to me, and so channeling past loved ones, or even as we stated today, archangels and higher energies set forward very easily as well. Yeah. And now I have been doing different forms of Reiki modalities as well. So both remote and just finished my weekend course. Actually, yeah, this past weekend for hands-on level 1 Reiki. So I get to do the level 2 in March next year. So that's something to look forward to, very much so.
Yeah, that's great. And something that I also want to bring up and make sure that people are aware of, when you do your Reiki, you are in regular contact with different Reiki masters that have transitioned. The founder
Yes,
of
yeah.
Reiki, as a matter of fact, comes to play with you quite a lot.
Yes, I did Sui, Hiroshi, and the Hawaiian Reiki master Takata as well. And she's very playful, very small and very feisty, but very wise at the same time. And yeah, their energies are amazing. And to then walk them in the universal consciousness of Reiki as well, of past, present, and future practitioners is a very powerful. I wish to use modality, but it's a lot more than that.
Process.
So
It's a powerful
combined
process.
energy. Yeah.
So if you guys resonate with Samuel and you'd like to work with him, he is offering a discount to anybody that comes through the virtual summit. Again, information is on the website. And as always, for those of you that are listening to this much later than the season, Samuel is a regular contributor to the platform. So just reach out. See you later, Kiara. Just reach out and connect with him. I would, obviously I'm biased, but I would highly recommend it. Anything
Well,
else you
thank
want to
you.
say in closing, Samuel?
No, I think everything's been said. It's been a very profound morning, I think.
I would agree. I would agree. Thank you all. Thank you to all of our spirit friends that came to play with us. We appreciate your guidance as always, and your support, your wisdom. We're going to be continuing on in about a half an hour with Heidi Sue. So feel free to come back and join us. We look forward to that. And until next time, whenever that might be, I will leave you with being spirit, being human, and simply being from love. Thank you for being part of this incredible experience. We hope that this session has inspired a new level of understanding within you, allowing you to expand more easily into the essence of your true self and become an even more powerful alchemist in your own life. We invite you to listen to the session again and again in order to go deeper each time and expand even more. Have it be via the replays or the unlimited access package. If you have enjoyed being part of this event, we invite you to tell your friends so that they can join us in the future. We are grateful that you are here, and we thank you for co-creating this experience with us. Until next time, we leave you with being spirit, being human, and simply being from love.